Okay.
Are you gonna play it yourself?
Hello, and welcome to Lancast, a podcast in which we'll be digging into political and other topics here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and with local people like my guest today, Josh Gerber, former state rep candidate, who I'll introduce in a minute. I'm your host, Danny Martin. Why am I doing this? Mostly to try and satisfy my own curiosity about the place I live, in part because I'm not originally from here. I was born in North Carolina, moved to San Juan, Puerto Rico when I was 4, and moved back stateside when I was 8, and grew up mostly in Northern Virginia, or Nova as some people call it. As an adult, I've lived all over Connecticut, New York City, New Jersey, and San Francisco. But I'm glad to have settled here. Lancaster is a great place to live, and my journey living here and learning more about the township, Go Blue Streaks, and about the county, the region, and the state of Pennsylvania itself has kind of coincided with my political journey, whereas I used to only focus on foreign policy and on national news, in part because my life as an adult was so transient. But now I'm settled down, I have kids in the local public school system, so of course I'm going to pay attention. Plus COVID happened, and I realized how much state-level policies can directly impact and affect my life, as it did with most everyone. One thing I want to say about all these political issues, they are complex. Once you look under the surface, there are unintended consequences to almost every policy. And whether it's foreign, domestic, or local, I don't want to have to rely on media sound bites, partisan talking points, or what the quote-unquote official sources and authorities tell us. I want to read books on the topic, discuss things, and hear counterpoint and other opinions. And I love dialogue, and I'm willing to talk to anyone. So, I hope you come along on this journey with me. That's my spiel, so let's get to it. Josh Gerber, welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
All right. Well, we have one thing in common. Well, we probably have several things. You are not from this area either.
No.
Tell us a little bit.
So I come from a small town of 1,800 people, not a single stoplight in the town. All Caucasian, pretty much, farming community. And the town is called Memphis, Missouri. I was born and raised there until I was 20, and then I met a lovely girl online, and we talked back and forth, and we decided to date, so I flew out here to meet her and asked her dad to date. We dated, and next thing you know, a couple years later, we're married, and now we have 4 kids, and we live here.
Awesome.
I love my home. It's very different than Lancaster County.
In what ways?
Well, in my hometown, when you're driving and you don't wave at someone, the next time you see them, they're going to say, "Hey, what was wrong? You didn't wave at me when we drove past each other on the road." And out here, everyone's heads are down when they're driving. Heads are down in the sand and in their phones or on the radio. Everyone's very focused on like their task at hand. Where I come from, it's just very laid back. You don't really appreciate just how nice easy living is until you move to the East Coast, and because you didn't go immediately when the light was green, you get honked out and cursed at.
Try living in New York City.
No, thank you.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I love the Midwest. I think people there are super nice. And I've been to St. Louis a couple times. I have 2 high school friends that ended up moving out there, and one of them was from Kansas City. Just super nice hospitality. It kind of reminds me of the South, where I spent my first couple of years in North Carolina, and I always would go visit my grandmother on, holidays, and just get when they call you sugar in the restaurant, and if there's just something about Southern hospitality. Like, I'm going to imitate my grandmother now and embarrass myself. She'd be like, "Daniel, I'm going to fix you some pecan pie." I just love that. It warms my heart.
Well,
anyway.
I would say so my particular area is northeast Missouri. So I'm about 8 miles from Iowa, 15 miles from Illinois. So I'm like right up there, right by the Mississippi, and I would say that we were the Yankee part of Missouri. Because the interesting thing is there's definitely a line in Missouri where there were slaves back in the day, and then when there's not slaves. And Missouri was like a really bloody divided area during that time. So like I would say there's no one really talks like that where I'm from.
Yeah.
It's more like just Midwest plain speaking people. You know, their slang, you know, people say ain't and you know, words that aren't really words, but everyone knows what you're saying. But everyone cares about everyone's well-being.
Right.
You know, there's just a different feeling when I have 4 kids and I would let my kids play in a yard in my hometown, no problems. Even though I live in Mount Joy, which is fairly safe, even when I let my oldest son out to play in the sandbox, I go out there and check constantly because I just don't feel that it's safe. You know, we have a park, you know, right down the road, and I probably will never let my kids just walk down the road to the park. I'll probably always have to be there just because I don't feel like this area is as safe as where I came from.
Right.
Like,
that's interesting.
The community of everyone knows your name where I come from. Everyone, you know, if you do something wrong and someone sees it, they're gonna go tell your parents right away. You know, so there's accountability, there's community. You know, if you're out riding your bike and you know your best friend's aunt, you know, sees you, they'll say, "Hey, do you want a drink?" And you know, yeah, I'll get a drink. So you know, you and your buddies go into their aunt's house, so she gives you a nice cold glass of sweet tea, and then you get on your bikes and you keep going. You know, that's where I come from.
Yeah.
And here, you can't do that. In my opinion, you can't do that.
Do you think it could just be maybe the town is just a little bit more insular? Like if you had grown up here, like you might feel a little more safe, like just kind of more familiar with things.
Perhaps, but I also feel like the culture around here is so task oriented and so ramrodded where you have to get these things done in order to feel like you accomplished the day or you won the day. That sort of lifestyle for a kid doesn't really exist here.
It sounds to me like you're describing life in a city. Have you ever lived in a big city?
No. I lived 20 years in my hometown of 1,800 people.
Yeah, because that's interesting to hear you describe that. It sounds to me how I felt when I first moved to New York City, which is probably the first big city I lived in. But then I lived in San Francisco after that. And yeah, it's kind of the same thing. It's a faster pace, and people are more focused on whatever tasks they have. And it's not that people are unfriendly, but
they can't help it.
Yeah, I mean,
their goals. This area is so goal focused,
right,
and so goal oriented that they kind of don't even realize the beauty that they like. The beauty of life goes by them, you know. And I noticed that with numerous people that I've met here and people who I'm friends with. Like, there's pressure here, Your kids, you probably, if your kids don't go to college, you'll be disappointed, right?
Wow, that's a whole nother conversation. I'm kind of, no, I would be sad for them, but I wouldn't say disappointed. And that it took me years to get out of that mindset. I mean, it depends on what kind of career they have in place of it,
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, like, the sheer pressure for your kid to, like, be successful and be
it's kind
head
of
honcho. It's there's so much pressure on kids here.
I feel there is. That's a really good point.
And where I come from, like, it's live your childhood to the best of your ability. Have as much fun, get in as much trouble as you possibly can, because you're only a kid one time in your life.
Right.
Like, me and my wife get in this chit chat all the time. Our oldest kid isn't even 6 yet, and she's like, oh, when he's 14, he can get his first job. And I'm like, 14? When he's 14 in the summer, I'm not going to make him go to work. I want him to live his teen years before he's 18 as free as he can in the summer so he can do things and experience things and just have fun. Because once that's over, as soon as you turn 18, as soon as you're out of high school, you are then a man or you are then a woman, and you're responsible for yourself. And
yes,
I can't tell you all the fun stories that I had as a child or a teenager, where I come from, and I asked my wife, what'd you do for fun? I'm like, the best day for me was when I got a car so I could go do a summer job. I'm like, what? A summer job? That was your peak of your like teenage years, was when you got a car and you could go do a summer job? And she's not the only one. All of her friends were the same way. And also I noticed, I'm 28, she's 28. We also realized that those friendships in her childhood are gone. Her friendships are gone. My friendships that I molded as a child with my buddies, I'll call my buddies on the phone. I'll talk to them for hours still. And like we just like I just saw him yesterday. And I'll drive back home, 15-hour drive back home, and I'll literally just get out of the car, give my best friend Isaiah a hug, and we'll pick off as we left the last time.
Yeah.
And my wife's friends are gone. All of her friends from her childhood are gone.
Gone like they moved out of the area?
No, they're all here.
But they just grew apart, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I wonder how many people's experience is similar to that. How much is it, it has to do with different personalities.
Yeah, they were all fairly the same. And that was the interesting. They all went to Lancaster Mennonite High School.
Okay.
They all went to Crable Mennonite Elementary, which was over in Mount Joy area. So they're all like God-based people.
Yeah.
They all like were inseparable at school. Even in the summer times, they would get together and stuff. But her friends, it's over. It's gone. And me and my buddies, we could kick back and hang out just like we always could. And I feel like it's because we didn't take our time for granted. We so many kids are like, I can't wait till I can, make money. I can't wait till I can drive. I can't wait till I can do this, do that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, slow down.
Right.
Slow down, because like I said, you're only this age for so long.
Right.
And you only have so many responsibilities for so long until you have all the responsibilities in your life.
I 100% agree with that philosophy. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think kids should be pushed too hard, to the point where they're not enjoying their childhood, their upbringing. So, yeah, I agree with what you said. Yeah, one of the things I've observed about living, especially in this township, is like the sports culture. It's so competitive.
It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. With the football, I mean, all the sports, basketball, lacrosse, I've heard is that way too. Soccer. But yeah, I mean, I can see the competitiveness also academically, like, you want to get in the best classrooms and get the best grades. It's kind of a prestige thing. And
it's very much a prestige thing.
I've kind of soured on the whole thing.
Well, and just imagine being like a kid who just wants to be a kid.
Right.
And this area is just, from what I've seen, it's just notorious of like, I almost feel like the parents are living through their kids sometimes.
Yeah.
Around here. And where I come from, my parents were just like, do your best and have fun. And almost all my friends were that way. Some of my friends' parents place academics on a higher level than others. But most of them were just like, do your best, have fun, and sports. because of where I'm from, it's not a fair comparison, because you have a classroom of 35 people, and then here a classroom is what, 100, 200 kids class, graduating class, something like that.
depends on which school. It's more than that, I'm pretty sure.
It's probably more than that, right?
Yeah.
So, like, if you want to be on the football team, you're on the football team where I come from.
Oh, yeah, I see what
like,
you're
there's
saying.
no tryouts. There's everyone's on the team, but you might never play. If you're terrible.
Well, here's the interesting thing. It's kind of all relative because, to me, this town is the closest thing to a small town that I've ever had in my life. Because, like, I hear stories. My dad grew up in a real small town, also in North Carolina, Red Oak. It's about an hour from Raleigh, and I used to hear his great stories of growing up there. And I'd visit my grandmother, as I said, during holidays. And yeah, this town was like, it seemed like there, I don't know, maybe 100 people. It was a really small rural town. And, I was just visiting, but I never lived in a place like that. I mean, I lived in San Juan, which is, a metropolis. And then Northern Virginia is like one great big metropolis too. Especially now it's built up so much. So that never really had a small town feel. I lived a little bit in rural Connecticut, but it was also kind of insular there. I didn't really feel like I reaped the benefits of a small town. So my point is, yeah, and I lived in those big cities. So when I came to Lancaster, this actually felt like the most, what's the word? Kind of diverse in terms of like a little bit of rural and little bit of city.
It's very weird.
And I loved it. It was weird. It's actually, it's the most Christian place I've ever lived. Like, well, let me give you an example. When I grew up in Northern Virginia and, yeah, I'm a lifelong Catholic, but it's kind of like we didn't like wear our faith on our sleeve, Whereas the first time when I went to Virginia Tech for college, that was actually the first time I would look and see one of my peers, like at lunchtime, they were praying openly before saying grace. Whereas like I would like hide that kind of stuff because I was maybe not as a serious Christian. I was just going through the motions, because I was just a kid still, maybe your experience is different, but it's the Catholic experience is kind of weird. It depends on, what church you go to and how much you put into it.
Yeah. My religious experience as a kid was, I wouldn't say brutal. That's not the right word. I had a lot of expectations on me, from my church because I grew up Holiness Pentecostal, which is, if you can imagine what the Mennonites wear, the girls wear the same thing, only it's not flowers on the dresses. They can wear whatever dress they want. And the girls have to wear skirts and dresses, and their hair can be shown, in my denomination. And then for me, I wasn't allowed to wear shorts. I had to wear t-shirts with the sleeves below the elbow. We couldn't go anywhere where alcohol was served. So I had a lot of rules, and it's a small town, so everyone knows that particular kid over there goes to that church with all those rules. So I always had to be like super aware of where I was and how I was acting, because if I acted badly, that would reflect on the church. And this was a small church, probably the smallest church in town, but everyone talks at a small town.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So like I basically wore, my denomination on my sleeve because I had to.
Because you were under kind of a microscope.
Basically. So I'm not even a Holiness Pentecostal anymore. I'm just a Christian. I don't really believe in labels anymore. I don't care about labels. I don't care about your denomination anymore. I feel like it's almost like politics. What people love to make their little specific little group.
Yep.
And then what do? Instead of being happy in their own specific little group, they then attack another specific group.
Yeah.
For no apparent reason. Imagine what the American church could do if we were united and it didn't matter what denomination you were. Like we're infighting. Like, oh, you're not Christian enough. You're not Christian enough. I'm like, we're all Christians. And what do we see, like, in American politics? Oh, you're Democrat, you're Republican, you're Libertarian, you're Green Party, you're Communist. And what do we see? We see fighting. And that's exactly what the higher people want. As long as we fight each other, that they're winning. You were talking about Virginia. The Richmond, north of Richmond, are winning.
Oh, yes.
and they're always gonna win if we keep fighting each other.
This is a good segue, because another thing I wanted to say about Lancaster, at least for me, this is the most politically diverse place I've ever lived, because the big cities do lean heavily Democrat, and Northern Virginia has changed a lot. I would say back in the 80s, I remember in 6th grade, I go way back to the 80s. In 6th grade, I remember we did a poll of like, hey, how many people are going to vote for Reagan, or your parents are voting for Reagan? And like, everybody's hand went up.
Reagan won like 48 states or something like that.
Yeah, that's true. It was Reagan. So maybe that's not a good example, but I feel like it's definitely it has gotten more blue, especially the last 20 years. But it's changed a lot. So anyway, my point is, this is the closest thing to a red area. It's partially red.
Mm-hmm. It's very red.
It's purple, I guess.
No, it's not purple.
No.
Like outside of the town, outside of Lancaster City, it's red. From what I've seen.
Sure.
Outside of Lancaster City, it's red. Even like Manheim, it's
the rural areas.
Yeah. Which it's not even rural. Lancaster. People can say that this is rural, but I come from rural. Like you guys, this area's version, this version of rural, of the rural is weird, because you have like where I live. You can go down 23 Marietta Avenue. You'll start in Marietta. You'll drive through some cornfields. You'll drive into like Silver Springs. Then you'll drive through some more cornfields, and then you'll get closer to Lancaster City. Then you'll drive through Lancaster City, and then on the outside you'll drive through more cornfields. And it's like little town after little town, and then cornfields in between. And it's like, it's only like, what, 15 miles? 20 miles that you've driven? Maybe even less.
Yeah.
So it's like, people say this area is rural, and I'm like, no, this is not rural at all.
It's kind of a microcosm of rural, but not the real thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's stay on the topic of politics, because the show, I do want it to be a lot about politics, because that's what I'm interested.
Same here.
Yeah. Okay. So you ran for state rep in the 98. Yeah. Which Tom Jones ended up winning. So tell me what that experience was like, and your your platform and all that.
So, full disclosure, I was a Republican before I ran as a Libertarian. I was Republican my whole life. I was a little dork Republican, watching, Bush and John Kerry staying up all night. Had a little notebook. I was writing down the numbers as they came in over the TV screen. Like, I was like born and raised in a Republican home. And then like COVID hit. And I kind of just got tired of them lying. I just got tired of the Republicans lying. And the Republicans, they always seem well-hearted. But then when they need to stand up for their very constituents, they just fold every time. They have never stood up. Ever. Take what Nancy Pelosi did with how narrow her margins were in the last Congress, and how much she got done. She impeached Trump twice, and didn't they try a third time?
Yeah,
and they ran out of time.
Like
with her narrow margins, she impeached Trump twice. Okay, and now here we are. We have a little bit more numbers. McCarthy has a little more numbers, and what have they done? They've done nothing. But if you remember back to the last Congress, Matt Gaetz said, if Republicans got control, we're going to abolish this, we're going to abolish that, we're going to get rid of this, we're going to get rid of that. He doesn't really talk like that anymore. And I like Matt Gaetz. The Republicans are great at winning elections after they get defeated. Because they'll promise all this stuff, but then when they get in power, like, oh, we're in power, we're trying, but we can't,
Yeah.
And they just never ever do it, So that's the backdrop of me of why I ran as a Libertarian, and why I still am a Libertarian at heart. And I haven't switched back parties or anything
Right.
At least of right now. Anyways, what were you gonna say?
So
Something?
yeah, was your ire mostly directed at national level Republicans, or was it around here too?
Every single Republican that's in
Every level.
office,
Uh-huh.
I'm mad at them. I'm
Okay.
just mad at them because they do nothing but lie, and I don't even know if they realize it. The interesting thing about Republicans is that if you look back 10 years ago at
Mm-hmm.
what a Republican believed in, they would be alt right. 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
like if you look back 10 years and what Republicans stood for back then, they would be considered alt right today. And then what Democrats stood for back then, if you look at them now, they would be Republicans. Republicans are typically 10 years behind the progressive wheel. The Democrats will be 10 years ahead on this crazy topic like LGBTQ, or actually, let's stay with gay marriage.
Mm-hmm.
10 years ago, Democrats were screaming for gay marriage. Republicans
Mm-hmm.
were like, no, 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 no. Now, 10 years forward, probably every Republican, if you ask them, should gay people be able to get married? Most of them are going to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I feel like both parties are just both progressive parties, but one has a speed limit, one has a cruise control. The Democrats are like in the left lane, they're boom, going towards the leftist ideology. And then the Republicans are like, no, wait, slow down, we should do this slowly. And they just give in. That's just my view of the Republican Party.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So I ran as a Libertarian. I knew I didn't really have a chance. I didn't have much of help. I didn't have much. You helped me. Thank you.
Oh,
You helped me.
pleasure.
And the work that you have to do to be a candidate in a third party is extensive. Like, I had to get over 300 signatures just to be on the ballot. And by the way, even if I got 300 signatures, both the Democrats and the Republicans could then look at my list and see, like, if I spelled a word wrong on the person's address, they could throw it out.
Right.
Like, if you wrote down the word borough and you abbreviated borough, they could throw that out.
Right.
So they have every way to nitpick your petitions to get you off the ballot.
Right. So your minimum was 300.
Minimum was 300.
You had to collect 4 to 5.
I think I collected 420.
Yeah.
And that was like a tall order. It was just so exhausting. Because I didn't have all that much help. The most help I had was on primary day.
Right.
And I got, I think, over half of what I needed. The rest was just me door knocking and getting limited help from other people.
Right.
So my goal of running was that I wanted to show the disparity between what a real conservative constitutionalist is, which is what I think a lot of the libertarians are, and then the Republicans, and then the leftist Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like if you're libertarian, all you're wanting is for the government, for the police to obey the Constitution. That's all we want. Most libertarians believe that the Constitution is very solid to protect your rights. The problem is that the government overreaches daily, the police overreach daily, the mayors overreach daily, everyone in power overreaches on you daily, every single day. And Republicans, they'll use the government for their stuff, and then the Democrats will use the government for their stuff. And all us libertarians want is for you just to follow the document, the greatest document ever written. That's really all we want.
Okay. Yeah.
That's what I was running on. That's what like when I was in those debates with the Democrat, I was just like, the Constitution says this, the Constitution says that. What do you say to that? And they're just, wow, we need to move forward. We're representing blah 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 blah. I'm like, no. We are a constitutional republic. We need to follow our Constitution. It doesn't matter. It's not about feelings. Like Ben Shapiro says, facts don't care about your feelings.
Right. So what was the reception like for you when you were out there door knocking? Did you get any pushback, or like what were the counter arguments to what you're saying? Or did people just kind of shake their head or nod their head and say, okay, sure?
So Republicans were receptive,
Mm-hmm.
but they said I didn't have a chance. Most of them are like, I'm a libertarian. Most Republicans are like, most good Republicans are libertarian leaning.
Small L, as they say.
Yes, they're all small L's. Like, oh, you don't have a chance, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, some of them are like, I've read your website, I love your website, but Tom is going to win. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, but I mean, as soon as he gets in, as soon as he gets money rolling, as soon as he, realizes what the game is, he may say he's anti-establishment now, but once he sees what the game is, what is he going to be? And they're like, well, that's just how the game's played. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be.
I'm waiting to see if he introduces the Defend the Guard. So
I've been trying. and Tom's a good guy.
The new session. Yeah, I like Tom.
He's a good guy. I came pretty hard against him in the campaign, and then we met a week before the election. We talked for like 3 hours straight. Mm-hmm. We didn't even realize it was 3 hours, and we agreed on a lot of stuff. And now I talk to him like regularly. So he also isn't a normal Republican. He is a freedom caucus Republican, which is little L libertarian. Right. And I joked with him. I was like, look, he told me that they were going to have this freedom caucus and all this stuff. And I said, look, don't do freedom caucus. That's too general. You need to do liberty caucus.
Right.
And he's like, no, that won't fly. I'm like, well, there is a difference. Everyone's like, my freedoms, my freedoms, my freedoms. Everyone's, about their rights and all. But when you think of the word liberty, it's such a different word to me. Everyone thinks they have all these freedoms and stuff, but liberty to me is my favorite way to talk about like my rights.
Right.
And that's just my own opinion on the words.
So another libertarian principle, I'm going to kind of segue into this specific issue. The libertarians basically believe more in like private enterprise, like free market solving more problems, and government intervention is generally considered bad, right? So, and I kind of was down with that principle, and I mean I still am in general, but I think there's big exceptions because looking back through history. So I just finished reading this book by author Robert Bryce. It's called A Question of Power, and it's about the electrification of the United States. And one thing, okay, I'm going to read some statistics here. So before FDR, we had much of rural America was not, actually, I think it was 90% of rural America still didn't have power. And so FDR had these, big government programs, the New Deal, and starting in the 1930s, and by 1950, the number of 9 out of 10 farms lacking electricity was totally reversed. 9 out of 10 farms ended up being connected to the grid, and all these other benefits came about. He broke up these corrupt holding companies that were kind of the private companies that were responsible for the fire up for power up till then. They kind of ignored the rural areas because it was too expensive to wire them. And so the farmers, were, I mean, you could argue the farmers didn't need electricity, but I mean, look how much their quality of life improved after that. So I guess my point is, I would point that as an example of a big government policy that brought people out of poverty and actually worked. And maybe I would see the libertarians arguing against it. So anyway, you can give me your counterpoint of that.
Well, so I wouldn't even call that big government because it was voted on. It was a bill or an act. It was a bill. It was voted on by, the House, voted on the Senate. It was debated. The president signed it, and it happened. Big government, in my opinion, is the letter agencies telling you what to do without there even being a law. And it's just a policy. And those people are not even elected. Those people just work for the government. They come up with policies, and then the police state enforces it. So I would say that the electrification of America was completely done according to the Constitution, and I don't even think eminent domain did eminent domain even happen? for that, like for the polls and all that stuff.
I
don't know if it was or wasn't. I personally hate eminent domain.
Yeah.
I think that the Transcontinental Railroad was a marvel and something that completely changed the world and changed America forever. But also, the government should never be able to take someone's land away that they own.
Oh, I agree with that. Yeah.
And so going back to the electrification, that's such a long word for...
I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right.
I'm probably not. I'm from the Midwest, so I don't talk right.
Okay.
So, to me, that's just the correct government working. I don't even see, like I said, that's not really big government to me. And from what I read, you told me to read up on it, and from what I read, I mean, it was staunchly debated.
Sure.
And not everyone came to a consensus, but it passed.
Right.
And when it passed, everyone lowered their guard. It went through, and it happened. And at least the tax money was being used for Americans. At least the money that was created, the money that was allocated for that was taxpayer money from Americans to benefit Americans.
Right.
Where now big government it's 3-letter agencies. They're not elected. They have no term limits, and they just pop up these rules on their own. They pop up these policies on their own, and we have to obey them.
Oh yeah, I agree with you there. You're talking about the FBI and DOJ.
FBI, it's all of them. It's all the ATF, the ATF for instance.
Yeah,
they can't even define what gun parts are. Just a few months ago, they outlawed the pistol brace for AR-15s. For one, that doesn't make a gun shoot any better or worse. It's just an attachment. But those people that made that rule I think they said around 12,000 people felons just because they possessed it. How can such a small, unelected amount of people have the power to create policies that then are enforced by the end of a gun, by the FBI, and by the ATF? How is all that done without Congress doing a thing? That's big government.
Tune in for part 2 of this interview with Josh Gerber on the next episode of Lancaster.